Welcome to Murmuring Myths for Sleep. You've arrived at the quiet edge of the day, where noise fades and thoughts begin to soften. This is your time, not to do, not to solve, but simply to rest. Take a slow, steady breath, and let the weight of the day loosen its hold. Let the world grow distant, like the last light slipping behind a hill. Here, we move gently, unhurried. Together, in this space, we drift through forgotten stories from history and mythology. Not the loud ones, not the tales carved in marble, or shouted across battlefields. These are the soft ones. Stories carried in whispers, buried in footnotes, remembered by candlelight. Tales that are slow, ancient, and heavy with the small details time almost forgot. These are stories without urgency, without endings that demand attention. They ask only that you listen, until you drift away. Before we begin, you're welcome to leave a small note in the comments. What time is it where you are, and where in the world are you listening from? It's a quiet way to share this moment with others who, like you, are here to let go. Now that you are settled, turn off the light, let your body grow still, and allow me to guide you through what once was, what was believed, and what may never have been at all. Section 1. Before the horn became magical. You are here now, in stillness. In quiet thought, let your breath fall gently, like a feather drifting through the air. Tonight, we return not to battlefields or palaces, but to the soft traces left by forgotten scribes, and the fading murals that sleep on the walls of ancient sanctuaries. The unicorn, that gentle symbol of purity in myth, did not begin as a creature of forests lit by starlight. Its origins were simpler, perhaps even more believable. The earliest records we have show that the unicorn was not born in European folklore, but in the careful writings of Mesopotamian scholars, in the great library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, where the Epic of Gilgamesh was carefully preserved on clay tablets. Other texts quietly described animals, both familiar and strange. Among these were listings of one-horned, bulls, and horse-like creatures with a single horn at the center of the forehead. Yet the scribes did not speak of them with wonder or fear. These animals were noted as curious, perhaps sacred, but not magical. Far to the east, in the Indus Valley, small stone seals carved from steatite soft soapstone depicted slender creatures with long necks and a single horn. These artifacts, dating back as far as 2000 BCE, are among the oldest visual records of unicorn-like beings. These seals were not decorative objects. They were used in trade and ritual, pressed into soft clay as marks of authority. Perhaps they were revered, but there is no sign they were considered mythical. They were not imagined, they were important. You may wonder what made these animals so significant. Perhaps it was the singular horn that set them apart, a single, central feature that made them rare, and by that rarity, closer to the divine. In the Vedic texts of early India, we find mention of a creature called the Ekashringa, meaning one horn, sometimes interpreted as a rhinoceros, and other times more like a wild horse. This being was not soft or peaceful. It was fierce, sacred. Its horn was believed to purify water or detect poison, making it an object of power. Not fantasy. Persian accounts from the Achaemenid Empire also speak of strong desert creatures with a single horn. Some scholars believe these to be descriptions of the oryx, a kind of antelope whose long, straight horns can appear as one when seen from the side. Over time, small errors in translation, distant memories, and eager imaginations reshaped these animals into something new, and from these scattered truths, the image of a graceful, one-horned horse began to emerge. The Greeks did not invent the unicorn, but they helped carry the idea westward. In the 4th century before the Common Era, the historian Ctesias wrote of a wild creature in India, roughly the size of a horse. It had a white body, a purple head, and a horn with 3 colors, red at the tip, black in the middle, and white at the base. Ctesias did not claim to have seen this creature himself. His writings were based on stories from Persian traders and Eastern travelers. But the Greeks treated his accounts with interest. They did not see the unicorn as a myth. They viewed it like the rhinoceros or the giraffe, strange, exotic, and real. Even Aristotle made mention of one-horned animals. For him, they were natural anomalies, oddities of the natural world, but not creations of fantasy. And so the unicorn lived, for centuries, not as a symbol of magic, but as a misunderstood creature of nature, a distant possibility, a living curiosity. It was only much later, as these ancient writings were reinterpreted by Roman thinkers, and later by medieval Christian scholars, that the unicorn began to change. Slowly, subtly, it shifted. It became a symbol not just of rarity, but of virtue. Not just of strangeness, but of grace. This transformation was quiet, a slow drift from description to meaning, from fact to belief. Let us pause here. Let your thoughts settle like dust upon the floor of a temple long forgotten. The unicorn, in its earliest form, was not created to dazzle or inspire wonder. It was real, or at least, it was real enough to record. Misunderstood perhaps, but never dismissed. And now, before we close this chapter, let us ask a question. What of the other horned creature? The one with 2 points instead of 1. The one we rarely speak of. What of the bicorn? Was it real? Was it symbolic? Was it a warning? That is a thought we will follow next. Section 2. 2 horns and 1 truth. You're still here. The night is quiet. Your breath moves gently, and the world continues to fade, just enough for your thoughts to wander deeper. Let us now continue, moving slowly into the Middle Ages. This was a time of manuscripts and candlelight, a time when ideas from the ancient world were copied, studied, and often transformed. It was here, in the monastic libraries of Europe, that the unicorn changed once again. No longer just an unusual animal, it became a symbol with deep spiritual meaning. For early Christian writers, the unicorn was not simply rare, it was pure, and this purity carried profound weight. In Christian texts, like the Physiologus, written between the 2nd and 4th centuries, the unicorn appears as more than a beast. It becomes an allegory. According to the story, the unicorn is so wild that no man can capture it. Only a young virgin can tame it. When the creature rests its head in her lap, it becomes calm and still. From this, the unicorn was interpreted as a symbol of Christ. The virgin represented Mary. The horn itself stood for divine unity. These ideas were repeated in sermons, stories, and stained glass. In medieval tapestries, the unicorn is often shown resting near a maiden, or surrounded by lilies and vines. Its image became a teaching tool, a way to speak of holiness, sacrifice, and mystery. During this time, the horn took on magical qualities of its own. It was believed to detect and purify poison. Royal families paid extraordinary sums for what they believed were unicorn horns, of which were actually narwhal tusks taken from Arctic waters. These objects were ground into powder, made into goblets, or kept as sacred relics. Whether or not they worked did not matter. Their presence offered comfort and protection. The unicorn had now become something more than legend. It was woven into the very language of virtue, belief, and protection. A quiet guardian, but as the unicorn rose in meaning and value, another creature lurked in the shadows. One that spoke not of unity, but of contradiction. This was the bicorn. The bicorn is far less known. Its image rarely appears in noble halls or illuminated manuscripts. Instead, it lives in the margins literally. Drawings of it are found in the corners of medieval texts, or carved into the sides of furniture and stone. It is almost always strange, often unsettling. The bicorn is said to have 2 horns and a divided nature. In some stories, it is described as feline or ox-like. In others, it appears bloated, with a wide, toothy grin. But most often, the bicorn is remembered for one peculiar tale. According to medieval satire, the bicorn feeds exclusively on faithful husbands. The idea was that such men were so common, the bicorn never went hungry. Its partner, the Chishavacha, grotesque cow fed only unfaithful wives and was always starving. These creatures were part joke, part warning. They were created to mock, to entertain, and perhaps to reflect uncomfortable truths about trust and relationships. Yet, beneath the humor lies something more. The 2 horns of the bicorn were often seen as a symbol of duality. 2 sides, 2 truths, 2 faces. Where the unicorn represented unity and purity, the bicorn suggested confusion and contradiction. A creature that could not be tamed, not because it was wild, but because it was divided. And while the unicorn moved upward into the sacred, the bicorn drifted downward into folklore and fear. Some later depictions link it to demonic forms, perhaps influenced by its 2 horns, or by the fear of hidden motives and false appearances. Yet in some corners of Europe, the bicorn was not purely evil. In certain carvings, it appears as a kind of guardian, watching over doorways or village wells. Its role is unclear, but its presence is consistent. The bicorn was not forgotten. It was simply pushed to the edge of the story. In this contrast, we find a quiet reflection. 1 horn, 1 truth. 2 horns, 2 natures. Why did we choose to raise one creature and bury the other? Why did the unicorn become a symbol of divine perfection, while the bicorn became a joke or a warning? Perhaps it is easier to believe in what is whole than in what is divided. But the story is not over. Let us ask one more question before we continue. In the long passage of time, what became of these 2 horned figures? How did they survive the rise of science, the changes of art, and the silence of history? That is where we will go next. Section 3. Echoes of the Horned Beasts. The night deepens. Your body grows heavier, more relaxed. The world around you softens, like candlelight melting into shadow. Let us return now, not to a distant kingdom, but to a quieter place, a place where old stories linger, not in temples or tapestries, but in forgotten books, quiet metaphors, in the spaces between belief and doubt. By the time the Renaissance dawned across Europe, the unicorn had already passed through many transformations. It had been a sacred animal, a theological symbol, and a prized possession. Now, it was becoming something else, a curiosity of the past, a subject of natural inquiry, and a question waiting for an answer. Explorers traveled farther than ever before. They crossed oceans, climbed mountains, and wrote down what they saw. Some searched for the unicorn, believing it might still exist in remote forests or foreign lands. But what they found were the real animals behind the myth: rhinoceroses, oryxes, narwhals, and yet, the belief in unicorns did not disappear. In books of natural history, carefully illustrated and widely read, unicorns still appeared. Some looked like goats, others like deer or antelopes. Their horns were long and spiraled, often described with care but little certainty. Scientists and scholars included them, not because they had seen them, but because so many others had written about them. In this way, the unicorn remained alive, not in the forests of the world, but in the forests of the mind. Meanwhile, the bicorn faded almost entirely. It had never enjoyed the reverence given to the unicorn. It was never painted on shields or sewn into banners. It had lived in humor, in satire, in quiet suspicion. And now, with the rise of reason and science, even those shadows began to disappear. But the idea of duality did not vanish. In the symbolic language of alchemy and mysticism, horned creatures continued to appear. The unicorn became a sign of spiritual unity, the merging of opposites into one form. The single horn rising from the forehead represented focused truth and divine perfection. Some texts included creatures with two horns, though rarely named. They symbolized tension, division, the necessary chaos before harmony. This was no longer about animals, it was about ideas, and as the centuries turned, the unicorn found new meaning. During the Romantic period, poets and painters reimagined it as a creature of longing, a symbol not of purity, but of something lost, something we remembered, but could not return to. In these stories, the unicorn did not appear in churches or royal courts. It wandered through lonely forests, quiet and unreachable. It stood for innocence, or for beauty too delicate to last. The bicorn did not share this rebirth, but it never disappeared completely. In small corners of folklore, strange creatures with two horns, two faces, or dual natures continued to appear. Sometimes they were seen as dangerous, sometimes as protective. Their meaning was unclear, but their shape remained. In modern times, the unicorn has taken on new forms. In popular culture, it is sometimes playful, sometimes ironic, but it still carries the old weight of rarity. To call someone a unicorn today is to say they are one of a kind, elusive, special in business. A unicorn is a startup valued at over $1 billion. A dream that somehow became real, and still, the horn remains a symbol, a mark of what is rare, beautiful, or nearly impossible. The bicorn, though seldom named, has returned in subtler ways. In psychology, in art, and in identity, we now speak more freely about contradiction, about the self as divided, about living with two truths at once. In this light, the bicorn becomes a quiet symbol not of deceit, but of complexity. A reminder that not all things can be simple, that not all purity is honest, that some truths come in pairs. Tonight, you have listened to the story of two creatures. One horn, one truth. Two horns, two perspectives. Each represents something more than just a beast. Each reflects a part of us. The unicorn endures because we still hope. The bicorn lingers because we still question. And so, as you drift further into rest, you might wonder, what other creatures wait in the forgotten corners of our history? What meanings have we buried not because they were false, but because they were difficult? Perhaps those are the myths worth rediscovering.